Hello YouTube and welcome back to another Dare to Game video. Today we're playing Mount & Blade Bannerlord, specifically the Realm of Thrones Total Conversion mod that brings the whole world into the Game of Thrones universe. Today's video topic is the top 10 best warrior husbands, so the 10 best guys that you can marry in this game if you want them to be a warrior, so someone who is in your party and fights for you. And the main skills that we focus on here are primarily their personal combat skills, and then as a secondary thing to focus on their tactics ability, because as a warrior you might have them leading some of your troops, say you assign them to lead your cavalry or something, and so you want their tactics skill to be high for that as well. And so we're gonna go from 10 to 1, 10 being the worst, 1 being the best, and we'll just dive on in. And so the way to find any character in this game for something like this is as follows. If you're on PC, you're gonna want to press the N key to get into your notes menu, your encyclopedia, and then from there you can click on heroes, and then you narrow it down as appropriate. So it's a husband, so we need them to be male. The status needs to be alive, because we can't marry someone that's dead. We'll come back to culture. You want them to be a lord or lady, because that is who is marriageable, and then of course not married, because if they're married they're not relevant for this list, because we need them to be unmarried. And then culture is the final way that you can narrow it down. And so for our first person on this list we have the North, and that person is going to be Robb Stark of the North, so leader of the North. Robb Stark takes the number 10 spot. He starts the game at age 25 with a charm skill of 140, trade of 142, steward of 162, tactics of 180, leadership of 180, combat of 240. And so he takes the number 10 spot, but he is still super good, and he of course ranks very highly in everything else. So Robb Stark is a main character from both the show and the books. You probably know who he is, but he's the eldest son of Eddard Stark and leads the North in the Battle of the War of the Five Kings. And so with that in mind, he starts off with good armor and weapons, including the ancestral Valyrian steel greatsword of House Stark, that being ice. His traits are generous, honest, daring, and cruel. And so combat skills, which is the main thing here, is pretty solid across the board. 240 in one-handed, 240 in polearms, 200 in bow, 180 in riding, 160 in athletics, 240 in two-handed, 160 in crossbow, and 160 in throwing. So super good across the board, great at everything. His highest combat skills, like I already said, are 240, and that's for one-handed, 200 in polearms. So of course, great there, better than most characters in the game. And his tactics is extremely high, being at level 180, giving him the highest tactics skill out of any marriageable husband in the game. So Robb Stark takes the number 10 spot. He's an excellent choice at only age 26, but let's move on to number 9. At number 9, we have AREO HOTAH, who in this game is a Lord of Dorne, a vassal of Doran Martell, but in the books and the show, even though they don't focus on it quite as much, he's the personal bodyguard of Doran Martell. But anyway, in the game, he starts off at age 34 with a charm skill of 80, trade of 61, steward of 82, tactics of 80, leadership of 80, and his personal combat skill, the highest one, is level 250, and he has that in polearm. And of course, his other combat skills are also quite good: 220 in two-handed, 240 in one-handed, 180 in bow, 230 in riding, 150 in athletics, 120 in crossbow, and 190 in throwing. So obviously great combat skills all around, but he does excel with that polearm. His traits are generous, daring, and merciful for his positive traits, and then of course impulsive for a negative trait. He is 34, so not crazy old. Definitely can be a husband you'll have for a nice long time, and like I said, he starts off with nice solid armor and weapons. So AREO HOTAH is a great option if you want to marry someone from Dorne, and is one of the best warrior husbands in the game. So AREO HOTAH takes the number 9 spot. And so at number 8, we have OBERYN Martell, who you can see is married here, but does not start the game married. So you can marry him as long as you get to it quick enough, and in this playthrough it did not take long before he married someone named Manan. But anyway, OBERYN Martell takes the number 8 spot on this list. He starts the game at age 38 with a charm skill of 60, trade of 62, steward of 81, tactics of 120, leadership of 120, and his highest combat skill being level 250, and he has that in polearm. But of course his other combat skills are also quite good: 240 in one-handed, 180 in bow, 230 at riding, 150 in athletics, 120 in crossbow, and 190 in throwing. So again, going to be super good skill-wise for all of the combat types. OBERYN Martell should be noticeable too. He's also known as the Red Viper of Dorne, so he's prominent in both the books and the show. He has the legendary Viper versus the Mountain fight in the show, which ends in a shocking way. Definitely a well-known character in general. Traits for him in the game here, we have honest and daring, so both of those are good traits for both a husband and a warrior. And again, like I said, just pretty solid, excellent combat skills all around. And of course, has the advantage of starting with good weapons and armor as well. So OBERYN Martell takes the number 8 spot for the best warrior husbands in the game. Let's move on to number 7. At number 7, we have VARDIS EGEN from The Vale, and you'll remember him from the show as the one who fights Bronn, well actually also the book, who fights Bronn in Tyrion's trial by combat at the AREO. So VARDIS EGEN was the Master at Arms for House Arryn at the Vale, and that's a big deal considering they're well known for their combat skills in the Vale, the Knights of the Vale are, and VARDIS EGEN was supposed to be the best of them. So with all that in mind, he starts the game at age 26, charm level of 80, trait of 61, steward of 82, tactics of 80, leadership of 80, and his personal combat skills, the highest one is 260, and he has that in polearm. Of course, he also has 250 in one-handed, 170 in bow, 230 in riding, 170 in athletics, 240 in two-handed, 130 in crossbow, and 130 in throwing. So solid combat stats across the board, but that 260 in polearm is what got him this spot here. He also starts with pretty solid armor and weapons, nothing to complain about there. Traits for him are generous and daring for the positive traits, and then impulsive for the negative traits. VARDIS EGEN is obviously a pretty solid option as a spouse, given those excellent combat stats, and tactics is not crazy high, but also not too terribly low. So yes, VARDIS EGEN is a solid option and takes the number 7 spot for the best warrior spouses in this game. Let's move on to number 6. And at number 6, we've got RAMSEY Snow, who is a member of the free houses in here, so if you're looking for him and can't find him because you were looking in the north, then, you know, obviously switch it over to the free houses. He starts the game at age 23 with a charm level of 60, trait of 81, steward of 102, tactics of 80, leadership of 80, and his highest combat ability is level 260, which he has in polearm. Of course, the rest of his combat skills are not far behind, 250 in one-handed, 170 in bow, 230 in riding, 170 in athletics, 240 in two-handed, 130 in crossbow, and 130 in throwing, so really solid combat stats across the board. He does start off with relatively light armor and weapons, so I guess that's kind of a downside, but not really that big of a deal because you can give him whatever you want. Traits, he has sadistic, which is a bad trait, especially as a husband, and cerebral, so he is quite smart. So RAMSEY Snow is probably not someone that you would ever want to marry in any sort of real setting, but in the game here, he makes an excellent warrior and can really help out your war party. So RAMSEY Snow, like I said, takes the number 6 spot on this list. If you don't remember him from the show or the books, he's the bastard son of Roose Bolton. Sadistic definitely describes him rather well. He's an antagonist, so he's one of the bad guys from the story. So yes, RAMSEY Snow takes the number 6 spot. Let's move on to number 5. At number 5, we've got someone from the Iron Islands, VICTARION GREYJOY, and he's one of the brothers of Balon Greyjoy, the leader of the Iron Island. He doesn't do a whole lot in the TV show from what I can remember. In fact, he might be represented as like an old priest in the show, but in the books he plays a larger role. And he starts the game at age 30. He starts with a charm skill of 80, trait of 101, steward of 122, tactics of 140, leadership of 140, and his highest combat skill is level 260, and he has that in polearm. The rest of his combat skills are not far behind though, 250 in one-handed, 180 in bow, 170 in riding, 150 in athletics, 230 in two-handed, 140 in crossbow, and 140 in throwing. So again, really solid combat stats across the board, but that 260 in polearm is his highest one. He starts off with nice, decent leveled armor and weapons. His traits starting off are close-fisted and cruel, so again, probably not great traits for a husband, but pretty solid traits as a warrior. They don't hurt at all, I should say. Yeah, VICTARION GREYJOY is an excellent option, great warrior, and he takes the number 5 spot on this list. So let's move on to number 4. At number 4, we have Jon Snow, who is a very balanced warrior, but he takes the number 4 spot overall on this list. Jon Snow is, well, I should say, he starts the game at age 24 with a charm skill of 100, trait of 141, steward of 161, tactics of 160, leadership of 160, and his highest combat skill is 270. He, of course, has that skill in 3, which are two-handed, one-handed, and polearm, making him very balanced. Also has 225 in archery, which is great, 200 in riding, 180 in athletics, 180 in crossbow, and 180 in throwing. So he doesn't have the all-around highest single stat combat, but he has really high stats across the board. So Jon Snow should definitely be a consideration for the best warrior spouse in the game. Traits he starts off with are honorable and fearless, and of course merciful, so great positive traits there. Jon Snow, you probably know who he is if you've even heard about the show or books. He's one of the main characters, bastard, quote-unquote bastard son of Eddard Stark, and becomes the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch after the death of Jeor Mormont. So Jon Snow, very prominent character from the show and an excellent spouse in the game in general, but on this list he takes the number 4 spot. At number 3, we've got BARRISTAN SELMY, who will be hard to find if you're looking for him where you'd think culture-wise he would be, which would be the Stormlands or Dorne, considering his house is from kind of right on the border there, but he's listed under the Giscari culture for some reason in this mod. He does start the game at age 52, so he is quite a bit older than most of the people on this list, but again, as a male spouse, that doesn't make the biggest difference in the world, the only thing being that obviously he will die sooner than the rest of these people of old age. He does, however, start with a charm skill of 60, trait of 61, steward of 80, tactics of 160, leadership of 160, and his highest combat skill is 280, which he has in polearmed. The rest of his combat skills are also quite high though. He starts at 270 in one-handed, 205 in bow, 250 in riding, 170 in athletics, 250 in two-handed, 140 in crossbow, and 210 in throwing. If you don't recognize him from just the name, he is the Lord Commander of the King's Guard at the beginning of the story, one of the all-time best swordsmen ever in the story. So if you're making a top 5 list of all time in Game of Thrones, Barristan Selmy will probably always be in that list, so should be well known. But yes, Barristan Selmy takes the number 3 spot on this list. At number 2, we have someone who you'd never want to marry in real life or any sort of setting like that, and just because of how terrible he is in the story, you might not want to marry him in the mod. But that being said, he's a ridiculously good warrior, so he should be considered. We have Gregor CLEGANE of the Westerlands. In the game, he starts off at age 33 with a charm skill of 80, trait of 62, steward of 81, tactics of 100, leadership of 100, and his highest combat skill is 290, which he has in the polearm. You'd think it would be two-handed, but it's not. That being said, the rest of his combat skills are not far behind. We have 280 in one-handed, 195 with a bow, 250 riding, 190 for athletics, 270 for two-handed, 150 for crossbow, and 150 for throwing. So crazy high combat skills across the board, but 290 for polearm makes him ridiculously high level there. Traits for him, we have deceitful, which is a bad trait, as well as impulsive, which is another bad one, and daring, which is a pretty solid one. So, like I said, if you can get past the horrifying figure that you're marrying, then Gregor CLEGANE makes a great spouse just for being a ridiculously powerful warrior. He does start with really solid weapons and armor as well, so nothing to complain about there. So like I said, Gregor CLEGANE, or the Mountain That Rides, takes the number 2 spot for the best warrior husbands in this game. Let's move on to number 1. Finally, at number 1, we have another Giscari spouse, a servant of House Targaryen, Grey Worm, the Unsullied commander from both the books and the show. Interesting to marry him as an Unsullied because, as we know, they are castrati in the story, and so therefore wouldn't make great husbands, at least if you want to have children. But in the mod, that doesn't matter because you totally can have children with him. Grey Worm takes the number 1 spot. In the game, he starts at the age of 30 with a charm skill of 80, trait of 60, steward of 81, tactics of 160, leadership of 160, and his highest combat skill is, again, 290, and that again being in polearm, just like the Mountain. For the rest of his combat skills, we have a one-handed of 280, bow of 195, riding of 250, athletics of 190, two-handed of 270, crossbow of 150, and throwing of 150. So pretty dang close to the Mountain stats all across the board, except most of them are better than the Mountain stats. So interestingly enough, in this game, they say that Grey Worm would beat the Mountain in one-on-one combat, basically just based on those stats. I'd love to see that matchup in the show, and I seriously doubt Grey Worm would win it in either the show or the book. But with that being said, in the mod, he does take the number 1 best spot for the best warriors that you can marry in the game. So that is all 10 of the best warriors you can marry in this game, at least for the male branch. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful, but that's all for today, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching another Dare to Game video. If you liked this video, please leave a like and a comment. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel. If you like my content and would like to support this channel, consider becoming a member today for as little as $1.99 a month. It makes a huge difference. But in any case, thanks for watching and have a nice day. I'll see you next time.